Welcome to Live with Anton Gunn. It is Wednesday, 2 p.m. East Coast time, 11 a.m. Pacific. To everybody in the Central Time Zone and the Mountain Time Zone, you know it's time to get in where you fit in. I'm excited today to talk about an important subject, and I've titled this session Reinventing Pathways to the C-Suite. But let me tell you what it's really about. It's really about succession planning, that every organization that thrives will only thrive if they have a solid succession plan. But I'm here to tell you, for many, many years, many years, organizations have not had good succession plans. I literally was talking to a client yesterday about some of their succession decisions. I'm working with a lot of organizations, helping them to strategize around how they build a succession plan. I was talking to a small business owner who's been in the construction industry for about 7 to 10 years and is ready to transition to a new phase of life. And he's struggling with who his successor is going to be. If you don't have a succession plan for your business or your organization, your company or your department, you're going to struggle, because what you're going to do by not having a succession plan is you're going to let the whims of life take over. And what do I mean, whims of life? Many times you might have every intention of staying in an organization for the next 10 years. That's your commitment. I'm going to be here for 10 years. I'm going to ride it out. But then all of a sudden, out of the blue, life moves for you. Maybe something happens. God forbid you pass away. Well, if you're not here, what's the plan to replace you? Well, there was no plan, because you never talked about it. You never thought about it. You never developed anybody. You never had a framework for succession planning. And so life moves to your organization, which is people are now scrambling to figure out who's going to replace you as a leader. So they start looking internally, they look externally, and you don't have any idea what you're going to get without a strategic plan. I've seen this happen at faith-based institutions. You know, churches get founded by a pastor. That pastor is planning to be there for the next 45 years, preaching and leading the organization, and they don't take time to develop a succession plan, and God forbid something happens. So this happens in business, in industry. It happens all across the board in churches and other institutions. I mean, even some nonprofits. I've been talking about succession plan a lot. I was talking to a person about a national nonprofit organization that a lot of people are familiar with. I'm not going to name that organization, but that organization has done absolutely nothing to prepare for a succession plan. So when the person who is the president and CEO of this association either leaves or passes away, we all believe that that organization is going to collapse. So the importance of having a succession plan, if it's not evident to you right now, you should understand, if nothing else, what I'm saying, that is really important. But I want to bring in another element, that even if you do have a succession plan, there's probably some flaws in your succession plan, some big flaws. Now, when I say flaws, I'm talking about the fact that a lot of organizations do succession planning, but they have this age-old, tired, rigid, and strict top-down framework for how they decide who gets to be in leadership, who gets to be in the C-suite, who gets to move up the ladder. That flaw involves the following things. It involves the right school, the right degree, the right network, and the right background. That is, if you didn't go to the right school, if you didn't have the right degree, if you're not connected in the right network, if you're not connected with the right background, then you have no opportunity for a pathway to the C-suite, no opportunity for the pathway to leadership. That's a flaw in some organizations. Let me give you an example. This is not a real life example, but I'm going to give you one because it's one that's relevant to me. My wife and I have been watching this show on Netflix called Suits. Apparently, it was a show that was on network television some years ago, back in the early 2000s or the mid 2000s, if you will. And I never saw it. It was on for 8 seasons. It's a very good show, but for some reason, it is now trending as one of the top shows to watch on Netflix. And we have literally been watching episode after episode of Suits. Now, I won't give you the context of the show, but I will tell you that the show is about a corporate law firm in New York City. There's a managing partner of this law firm who is an African American woman. There are several senior partners and all kinds of partners in this law firm, and they all do a great job. They deal in business and industry, litigation, lawsuits, separation, severances, and even a murder trial to some degree. The show is pretty good. But here's what I want to tell you about Suits that points out the fatal flaw in their succession plan. See, Suits is a show predicated on you getting a job at this law firm because you graduated from Harvard Law School. That they literally talk about in the show that they pride themselves that there's no partner, no associate, no one who is a lawyer in leadership in this organization unless they graduated from Harvard Law School. That's their criteria. So if you went to Yale, it doesn't matter. If you went to UCLA, it doesn't matter. If you went to any law school anywhere else in the country, it doesn't matter if you did not go to Harvard and graduate from Harvard Law. And then they're even more prescriptive and selective of who from Harvard Law will they take as an associate, and they only take the best of the best. Now, that works out great for a television show, which is not real life. But could you imagine working in an organization that the only way you could become a senior partner, or the only way you could become the chief financial officer or the chief executive officer, is that you had to go to a certain school, that you had to get a degree from that school, and you had to have the right network, the right connections to give you an opportunity in order for you to get a job in that organization. Could you imagine that? Well, I'm here to tell you that there's plenty of organizations who do that same thing every day. They're not fake. They're not on TV. They're real life organizations. And you can literally look at the last 5 CEOs and see that they all went to the same school. They all got the same degree. They all were in the same fraternity or in the same network. Their parents were in the same network. Their parents was in the same organization. It's almost like membership has its privileges to get an opportunity in this career path. Well, here's what I'm telling you about that. That's a flaw. That is a fatal flaw that's going to lead to disaster in your organization if you're so exclusive that you have to fit this narrow prerequisite of skills and experience in order to enter into that top-down ladder. Let me give you another example of this top-down ladder. I know some organizations who may not have the degree requirement, or they may not have the what I call the school requirement, that you had to go to a certain school in order to get an opportunity, but you actually had to have a certain job in the organization. Now, what do I mean certain job? There's one organization that will remain nameless. I've worked with them years ago, don't work with them now, but I worked with them years ago. And here was the circumstance. If you wanted to become the CEO of this organization, you first had to be the general counsel of this organization. Yeah, you had to be a lawyer. So if you look at the 3 previous CEOs, they all started in the organization in the legal department. They all became the general counsel. And then when the CEO left or retired or moved on to something else, the next CEO came from the general counsel's office. So the pathway to leadership, if you wanted to become a CEO in this organization, you knew that you couldn't come from marketing or operations, or you couldn't come from finance. You had to go back to school, get a law degree, get a job inside the general counsel's office, work your way up to general counsel in order for you to get a path to be the C-suite. That is crazy. And there's so many organizations that have this rigid top-down old school framework for how you develop people. into leaders in the C-suite. Now, the problem with this is you're creating your leadership pipeline from a narrow mindset, people who don't have a broader perspective about what's going on in the world. You're limiting your ability to have an impact. Last week, I talked about diversity and why the importance of having diversity inside your organization. Well, you cannot get diversity unless you hire diverse people. And that means people who went to diverse schools, who have diverse degrees, who have diverse backgrounds and diverse skill sets, and yes, come from diverse networks. So if you want to reinvent the pathways to the C-suite, if you want to create opportunities to build a succession plan that is inclusive, that give you some of the best minds, the best ideas on how you can be successful, then you really need to take stock of what I'm going to share over the next few minutes, because the best organizations that I work with, that I train and I teach leaders about, I give them a game plan for how you can find the greatest diverse talent, bring them into your organization, get them to the senior most leadership level so they can impact the bottom line in the most massive way possible. I'm talking about greater innovation. I'm talking about greater customer engagement and employee engagement, and also greater revenues, because you've expanded the base of where your customers come from. Like, there's a simple formula to this, okay? And so my context for you is I want to give you some of these ways in which smart organizations are reinventing their pathways to leadership, reinventing their pathways to the C-suite, how they're doing their succession plans in a new and unique way that is yielding an inclusive process to bring more diverse mindsets into the organization that are actually helping them to achieve all the things that they want to achieve. So let me jump right into it. The first is understanding that there are different entry points to you being in a succession plan, or there should be different entry points. You shouldn't just look for people who are already on the administrative and leadership track into an organization. That's not going to yield the best inputs in order for you to build a diverse team on the top. You need to look at people who have a diverse set of experiences, and maybe coming into corporate America is not the first thing that they did. So for instance, you're talking to someone who works in large organizations, or with large organizations, should I say, and I've been in corporate America before. I've also been in the government sector. But what most of you don't know is that I started my career in the nonprofit sector. I started my career as a grassroots community organizer, doing movement and social justice work on the ground in low-income communities. It is not the typical pathway that someone ends up in the C-suite. And yes, I've been in the C-suite. I've been at the highest level of multiple organizations working with the chief executives there. But I didn't start out the gate of saying that I wanted to be in the C-suite. I didn't even start wanting to be in corporate America. I didn't even start wanting to be in any kind of industry. I didn't want to be in the healthcare industry. I wanted to be a high school teacher. But my career path led me down a pathway that for 10 years, I did grassroots community work and public policy work in nonprofit organizations, which gave me a totally unique perspective that I now bring to bear for all of my clients, that yields tremendous results for them, because my perspective is so different than a traditional perspective that people have in the organization. I'll never forget back when I was in the C-suite and we were in a meeting having a long conversation about some deep and important issues that were challenging the organization. And I said, had you guys ever thought about this in this way? And I laid out my perspective. And then after I laid out my perspective, literally universally, people said, well, I never thought about it like that. And the CEO says to me in front of everybody else, Anton, that's why I'm so glad that you're in the room, because you think about things differently than all of us do. You have a perspective that we don't have, and I think it's so valuable for us to hear. So how did I get that perspective? Again, I started in the grassroots world. I will also say that one of the things you need to understand is that I have a non-traditional business degree. I got a master's degree in social work. How many C-suite executives do you know got a master's degree in social work? Most of them got MBAs, they got JDs. If they're in healthcare, they may have a master's in health administration or a doctorate in business of some sort. But I don't have any degrees in business. I got a bachelor's degree in history and a master's degree in social work. My educational skill set is so different than a traditional pathway to the C-suite. So that reinforces that there are multiple entry points to the C-suite. Another perspective I want to offer is the flexible pace. And what do I mean flexible pace? Most organizations groom leaders like right from college, right to the MBA program, and then fast track them onto the leadership pathway. So they know whether you're ready for leadership by the time you're 30 years old. Because if you finish undergrad at 22, you maybe work 2 or 3 years, you get your MBA, and then you work in a company for another 4 or 5 years, they know whether you want to be in leadership of the company or not. So it's like there's this age context to moving up the pathway that you have to have achieved and checked all these boxes before you get into your first leadership development program. And then you have to have been at the company certain amount of time before anybody would put you in a senior leadership program. Well, he only has worked here for 12 months, so we can't put him in a leadership program. Well, she's brand new here. She just transferred in. So there's no way we can put her in the C-suite succession plan because she just got here. Well, I'm telling you, you need to be flexible in your organization as you think about how people get into the C-suite, because some are on a different pace. Like I have a friend of mine who literally did most of her career in nonprofit finance and leadership. And then at the age of 45 or so, decided that she wanted to go to law school. And she goes back to law school, graduates from law school, and now she's an attorney. And so her pathway is not traditional. Or what about all these people who have second careers? I mean, this is a shout out to all of the men and women who served our United States Armed Forces. Some people spend 20 years in the United States Navy, and then they finish their career in the Navy, they go back to school and get a degree, and they can be excellent leaders inside of a corporate organization for what they do. They need to move at a different pace. You got to be flexible in the pace at which people move into leadership. So definitely think about that as you build your strategy to build an inclusive. Give people some flexibility. They don't have to be 25 and they don't have to be 55. They might be 60 years old and ripe for them to move into C-suite. And having that diversity in leadership and that mindset and that experience could be a very helpful asset for you. Now, here's the third thing I want you to recognize. And I mentioned this already. You got to think about the cross-functionality of having leaders in your C-suite. And what do I mean by that? If we look at the C-suite or leadership teams in an organization, they usually come from a background focused on operations. Like they may have started in the warehouse and then they moved up to some level of business operations. And now they know how to manage a P&L. They know how to run the business. And so you go from being director of operations to the chief of operations to the CEO. Or as I mentioned earlier, you go from the legal office to the general counsel to the CEO. So it's either legal or operations. And maybe if it's a marketing company, you might go from marketing director to chief marketing officer to the CEO. But I want you to know that you have people in your organization who might be in a total department that you think is irrelevant to understanding the business, and they could be the most valuable person in your organization that really could be the executive that takes your organization to the highest heights and the deepest depths. You know, healthcare has this, framework of now putting physicians in leadership positions, that if you got an MD, then we're going to make you the CEO because you're a doctor and you know medicine. Well, I'm going to tell you, that's a silly and failed strategy to think that you have to be a doctor to run a hospital organization or a healthcare organization. See, doctors know medicine, but many times they don't know healthcare. Knowing healthcare is knowing the insurance industry, knowing the medical device industry, knowing healthcare finance, Medicaid, Medicare, knowing public policy. I know a whole bunch of doctors that don't know nothing about public policy. I met them every day when I was working on the Affordable Care Act. I was at the senior most level in the administration working on the ACA, and we didn't have any MDs in the room, not one. They might have been involved early on in crafting the framework of the policy, but in the day-to-day implementation, the people in the room had a totally different skill set. So I'm telling you right now, you got to think about from a functional standpoint, how do I bring people into my succession plan who have different work experiences inside the organization? Look at supply chain, look at operations, look at finance, look at marketing, look at customer service, look at facilities management, look at people who have the breadth and depth of knowledge about your company and how you do what you do, but could play a role. You got to put them in a succession plan. You got to identify that talent. Now, when I say identify that talent, this is the point that I'm going to close with. And I'm going to be real clear and specific on this one and be succinct about it. And I will probably come back and do another live where I lean into what I call the 7MC theory of leadership development. Or you could call it the 7MC theory for succession planning. Now, it looks like this. Now, I know some of you know that I'm a big hip hop fan. And Rakim, one of my favorite artists, has a verse that he says, I take 7 MCs, put them in a line, add 7 more brothers who think they can rhyme, but it'll take 7 more before I go for mine. Now there's 21 MCs ate up at the same time. You know, I had to get a little hip hop in there for you all. So that rhyme, we affectionately in hip hop call the 7MC theory. And so I have remixed Rakim's 7MC theory and created a 7MC theory for leadership development and succession planning. And here's what it looks like. And I'm talking to you, leader in the organization. If you are a leader at any level in an organization that has, let's say, at least 500 employees, this is not really for small nonprofits, although you probably could adapt it, or small companies, you could adapt it, but it's more scalable that if you go, say, from 500 employees to 5,000 employees, and even to 100,000 employees, every leader in your organization should be doing the 7MC theory of leadership development and succession planning. So here's what it looks like. At the beginning of every year, in January of the year, I'm going to just say January of 2024, you as a leader need to set your mind on doing the following things. And that is, you're going to engage 7 frontline leaders in your organization. Now, when I say frontline leaders, they could be at any level in the organization. They literally could be the security guy in the parking lot, or they could be someone who works in the finance division or operations. I'm talking 7 people. And as a leader, your job every year is to identify 7 people that you're going to engage with on a regular basis. And what does engagement mean? That's the E in the MC theory. I'm going to walk this back for you. The 7MC theory is 7 EMCEE. EMCEE. Let me tell you what the 7 MCs actually means. 7 people that you engage, mentor, coach, elevate, and empower. Let me give it to you again. The 7MC theory are 7 people that you as a leader every year will find 7 new people to engage, mentor, coach, empower, and then ultimately elevate. I flipped the last 2. Okay. I want to make sure I walk it out for you. So here we go real quick, because I got to get to my next meeting in 6 minutes. So in 6 minutes, I'm going to give you the 7MC theory. So every year you find 7 people in your organization that you engage. You meet with them for 30 minutes one-on-one. Find out their name, their background, why they choose to work at the organization, what they plan to do with their lives, what's their focus in their career. Engage them, see who they are, get to know them as an individual person. And then finally ask them this question. Ask them, would they be interested in growing their career path in the organization? Why you got to ask that question? Because don't assume that everybody wants to work in your organization forever. Because some people do, But some people don't. I've had people tell me, look, I'm only here till my wife finishes school. And then when she's finished school, we out. So I don't want to be here for 25 years. But some people will tell you, I want to be here forever. So if every year, if you find 7 people that you can engage and have that conversation with them, here's what you'll understand. There's several of them not only want you to engage them, they're going to want you to mentor them. So phase 2 is to go from engagement to mentorship. Who are you mentoring? And what do I mean mentoring? I literally mean mentoring. You mentor them, you develop them, you give them advice, you tell them about your pathway to the C-suite. You help them to build the right networks, build the right relationships, build the right connections, build the right insights into the organization. Become a mentor to show them the pathway to the C-suite. Pull the covers back, pull the shades back or the curtain back, whatever it is, you tell them the pathway to the C-suite in the company. Just tell the truth. Break it down for them. Because what you're going to see after you start to mentor them, that some of them going to want coaching from you. And coaching is different from mentorship. Coaching is literally saying, you have the talent and the skills to be successful. Now I'm going to guide you and motivate you. I'm going to develop you to the leader that you need to be. Coaching will involve making sure that they go back to school. They got time to go back to school if they need to go back to school, that they got time to get the training and education they need. You got to be invested in doing that for these 7 people every single year, 7 new people every single year. So you coach them. And then the next level is after they coach, they get some coaching, you're going to see that some of them are ready to be empowered. And so when I say empowerment, this is what it looks like. You assign them some special projects, put them on special committees. Don't be afraid to take a frontline person who you are engaging and mentoring and coaching and say, you know what, I want to put you on the compensation committee, or I'm going to invite you to join me at the next board meeting. Like, you want to give them some exposure to something that they haven't seen before. You want to empower them with knowledge, with information, with resources, with relationships. You want to move them to a place that they have never been. That's what empowerment is about. Because when you do that level of empowerment, here's what you're going to see. They're going to want more. Some of them are going to want more. And when they want more, what's going to happen is that they're going to hunger for an opportunity. And this is where you come in. They're going to look for a new job. They're going to look for a new opportunity. And what you need to then become is a person who elevates them by sponsorship. Sponsorship means calling the boss of another company and say, hey, listen, I know you got a vacant position for a chief of staff. Let me tell you about this woman in my organization that I've been engaging, mentoring, coaching, and empowering for the last year. She's ready for that opportunity. So I don't want to lose her to my organization, but I think she would be valuable enough to you to help you to be successful. And you call them on the phone and sponsor her. Maybe you sponsor them internally in your organization for new opportunities to come open. If you do that, you're going to elevate them, and then they're going to be successful and then be ready for the C-suite. Now, here's what I'm telling you to do. If you as a leader find 7 people each year to take through that same cycle and process, at the end of 7 years, you would have 49 people that you have looked to develop for a succession plan. And all 49 are not going to want to go all the way to the top. That's okay. The goal would be for you to end up with 7 who are ready to go up on top. And what does on top mean? 7 people that are ready to replace you. Now, why do they need to replace you? Because I've told you this before. If you stay in an organization in the same job, doing the same thing for 10 years or more, that means you're not good at your job. So I'm telling you, you don't want to get to that 10-year point and not have a sufficient number of diverse candidates in your succession plan. So I'm telling you right now, if you operate on the 7MC theory of leadership development, you will get better engagement. You will have better innovation in your organization, and your company and organization will be more successful than you could ever imagine because you diversified and reinvented the pathways to the C-suite. I want to thank you for watching. Everybody have a fantastic day, and we'll talk soon next week. Everybody have a good one.